Okay, sorry. What are we doing on today's show?
We're gonna be doing some email from viewers and
Viewer
stuff
email.
like that.
Okay, yeah.
Viewer email. Yeah.
Sure. Do you have some?
Yeah, got them right here.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
All right.
Yep.
Whenever y'all ready.
Yeah, we're gonna be off of camera 1 here. But
Camera. Got you.
Yep. Go for it.
Hey guys, CJ with Roswell Astronomy here in Roswell, Georgia, and today we're going to go through some viewer email and some comments off the channel. Super 21, love your videos. You should go to Hollywood, Country County. Okay. Jack be jumping, dude. Really? I don't know what that means. Do y'all know what that means? I don't know what that means. Paris forever. Stick to your day job. Country Kenny has more talent than you. Aww. That's kind of rough. Tattletale 491. Is Fox single? Really? You do know Fox is a stuffed toy, right? That my dog chews on. Griffin Slayer. Bring back Country Kenny. Yeah. I'm all over that. Let's see, Pablo Vasquez. Would be nice to see a video on your power management setup. Yeah! Well, there you go. There's a good suggestion. Let's do it! There are a couple of different ways to power up your equipment. When at home, most tend to use AC power, as most manufacturers supply AC adapters for their equipment. Sure, it's a bit easier in the beginning when you're getting started and everyone has AC power running to their house. But what about when you go into the field or a dark sky site? Well, unless your local club or your dark sky site has AC power on the field, you're going to need DC power. I guess you could run a generator out there if you're alone, but the noise and the fumes tend to aggravate those around you if they happen to be out there with you. Plus, you need to bring gasoline with you, and that could add another set of problems as well as logistic nightmares, not to mention the potential safety issues. I mean, like, who wants to become a human torch when you just wanted to shoot pictures? I've seen some people use AC to DC converters, but is that really necessary? Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. Since my rig is set up for DC power, I use a tabletop 110 AC to DC converter. But when I'm in the field, this isn't practical when I'm at sites with no AC power. In this case, at home, it works just fine and there's only a single AC connection instead of 4. Now in reality, most devices in astronomy and astroimaging are actually DC powered. In fact, most computers, like this one, or even your laptop, are also actually DC powered. Even PCs use an internal converter to bring AC down to DC. That's right, even though you may be plugging your device into a 110 volt outlet at home, the power block is converting to DC power, typically 12 volt DC. Even your cell phone, when charging, is breaking AC power down to DC, though it's actually 5 volt, not 12 volt. So whether you're in the field or at home, you can use 12 volt power to run everything and completely eliminate AC power, or just use a converter. Now, it does take some work and a little investment, so ask yourself a couple of questions before committing to straight DC. 1. Will I ever go to a site that doesn't have AC power supplied to the field? 2. Will I always have AC power to connect to? If you never see yourself having to face the possibility of not needing DC, then of course, stick to AC. But if lack of power exists, then DC is the way. I've seen some people use their cigarette plug adapters, which is usually supplied with new equipment, and if you're connecting to your car and only running your mount for visual, or even if you're lucky imaging while utilizing a DSLR camera which has its own batteries, then your car would probably work just fine. But you need to make sure that you check how many amps your mount is drawing, and if your car battery can handle the drain draw. In cases of just using your mount, a battery pack like this one should be sufficient. Yet, nothing is worse than being stuck somewhere with a dead battery. In fact, most standard car batteries will not support long evenings with power being sucked out. To run a complete imaging rig that includes the mount, a powered astro imaging camera, a focuser, and certainly the real amp killer, the dreaded dew heaters, you might even be running some red lights, who knows? Possibly a USB powered hub or whatever you can imagine. well then you're definitely going to need something strong like a marine deep cycle battery. These will usually last all night and still have power left over for possibly even a second night, and I've heard some people say they've even been able to get a third night out of it. But of course those are the really high dollar units. And of course some factors do exist. Some people use a gel type. One, being sealed and gel, you don't have to add water or risk spillage while in the car or while you're on site. Gel tends to last longer in both multiple charges over the life of the battery, and there's no mess associated due to being overturned. In fact, you can usually be mounted in any position. Two, you get a deeper discharge without hurting the battery and can still be recharged without issues. Some cons, however, they are pricey, they are very slow charging, and you can't just leave them on the charger for too long. You need to take them off as soon as charging is complete, unless you have an automatic charger that turns itself off. And with that being said, you need to make sure you are using the correct charger that will specifically handle gel-style battery charging. And if you violate number 2 and number 3, you could do irreversible damage to the battery. Of course, you have standard lead-type batteries, and those can work, but they're not deep cycle and typically will not last very long through the night, as you can't get a really deep enough discharge out of them, and they can drop voltage, which could hurt some electronics. However, if you're using a total badass lead cell, then you are good to go. Now there's also Agm batteries, which are similar to gel style and actually outsell gel types in popularity. AGMs are typically used when high bursts of amps are needed, like starting a motorhome or something of that nature. Life expectancy is pretty high, but that's if you don't exceed a maximum of 60% discharge between recharges. However, you can get deeper style that can go up to 80% discharge, but you're going to pay for it. AGMs are also a bit cheaper than the gel batteries, so whichever style you choose, just make sure it's sized properly. My battery is a Duracell Ultra AGM SLA battery. It's 100 amp hours deep cycle rated. Plenty of power to last through the night. I had several people in my club that recommended the battery and it works great for them. The price was around $180. So it is pricey, but not as much as a gel. And I got mine from Batteries Plus. Now you can even use a couple of batteries and either wire them into parallel or just divide your power requirements between the two. But you're probably not saving any money since you're buying 2 batteries. So it's just another piece of equipment to carry around, and batteries are not light. So now we have our battery, but how do we connect everything? Well, you could opt for using cigarette adapters that came standard and use cigarette ports on your battery box, or even wire a pigtail off the battery. Some have luck with these, while others do not trust them within an inch of their lives. They can easily be pulled out or tugged or snagged on something, or even worse, tripping over them in the middle of the night. Nothing is worse than your camera going out in the middle of an imaging session and you don't catch it for a while because you went to enjoy a beer or a cup of coffee. Of course, the other possibility is the cord getting stuck on the mount somewhere and pulled out when the scope is slewing or tracking. And you've gone to sleep already, so you don't catch it. Fear not, this is a little gizmo that ham operators have been using for years, and it's perfect for what we do as well. These are Powerpoles, sometimes known as Anderson Powerpoles. They provide a firm and reliable connection between your power source and the item that you are powering. It takes some effort to unplug, and they provide consistent power. You can use different wire sizes, utilizing the prongs that range from a size 15 up to a 45 in most cases. Most use the 15 size since most of our equipment is wired usually using 16 to 18 gauge or even 20 gauge. The cool thing is, even though the prongs will vary in size, they still insert into the standard size Powerpole plugs. Power distribution comes from distribution blocks, which are similar to car fuse blocks and are independently fused properly dependent on your equipment's amp draw. They're lightweight and you can be mounted right on the top of the scope or on the saddle plate, and it keeps your cables from dragging or snagging on the bottom. You will need a special crimping tool to secure your wire to the prongs and a small screwdriver to help inserting the prongs into the bodies. However, I have heard some people say that they didn't need the special tool, so basically to each their own. Depends on what you feel comfortable with. You do have to be careful when wiring your devices. Check to see the correct polarity of your equipment's inputs, as most are barrel jack designed. Most manufacturers use center positive, but some foreign manufacturers could use a center negative. You can check the device by looking for the symbol, which is usually printed somewhere on the device, or by checking the manual. Also, if you're using USB hubs or a mini router, check for correct voltage, as some use 5 volt and not 12 volt. Hitting these with 12 volt is going to fry them. In fact, verify the correct voltages for all your equipment. And while you're at it, check your amp draw for each device, as this will aid you in selecting the proper sized battery as well as your fuses. I also use a power monitor that is in between the supply side and the load side. It is good practice to know exactly what you're drawing from your battery and how many volts and amps the battery is providing. A quick side note, most batteries are going to be fully charged at 13.5 to 13.8 amps. Don't worry about it mostly, as your equipment can handle this, but check, as there is some limited equipment out there that will not tolerate voltage variations, including also having supply voltages under 12 volt. Here is my setup. I use a stackable tool chest that I bought at Home Depot that was on sale. It carries my eyepieces, extra cables, tools, tie wraps, etc., and has a large tough bin with wheels on the bottom that holds my battery. I have this plug, which I haven't had a chance to install yet, that will be wired from the battery to the plug, which will be mounted facing outside of the case, that my cable can then connect to in order to run up to the distribution box on my deck. Best part is, I can wheel it around and remove the upper boxes to leave it perfectly situated next to or even under the mount, depending on how high I have the mount set to. Power runs through the mount up to the distribution block. From there, I have my mount connected, the camera, my focuser, my dew heaters, my USB hub, and I can even power up my mini computer if I'm using it. Speaking of computers, how do you power up your laptop in the field? Well, there's a lot of discussion on this topic if you check out Cloudy Nights. Some people have obtained DC power connections for their laptops that can plug into their distribution blocks or their cars, while others elect for DC to AC power converters. However, these typically draw a lot of amps and can drain batteries quickly. If you decide on this route, definitely make sure that the battery can handle this draw. Others use mini computers and they draw low amps, or you can use a stick computer which draws even less. They can wirelessly tie into it through the Wi-Fi while on a tablet or a cell phone using either TeamViewer or VNC or Windows Remote Desktop. In my case, I have a Lenovo ThinkPad that I purchased refurbished from Lenovo directly. In addition to the standard battery, I also purchased the 6-cell add-on battery that gives me roughly 17 hours of runtime without fail. This is great in the field in the event the Mini fails and I need to run direct or just for monitoring purposes. Now, if you're using a Mini and you don't have Wi-Fi in the field, how do you tie that in? Easy. They make Mini 5-volt routers. In some instances, you can hardwire your Mini or your stick computer directly to the router and connect through a Wi-Fi with your tablet, cell, or laptop. Again, simple connection to the distribution block, but usually you have to utilize a 12 volt to a 5 volt adapter, something similar to this. There is a ton of information on the Astro sites and plenty of pictures of how peeps have connected and wired up their rigs. Some are a lot cleaner than mine, while others look like rat's nests. But hey, they do the job. Most important thing to remember is to count your amps and maybe even add an amp or two to properly size your battery. Ask around your local astronomy club and what others use and check out the different forms. Some need more power, while others do not need as much. For me, I tend to exaggerate my requirements, as I always want to know I have plenty to get me through a full session. Hey, thanks for watching. Clear skies.